Much like the Leyland Trucks and Buses Company, the products of British Leyland's van division were able to weather the storm of the wider corporate empire's financial turbulence and rose to become one of the biggest suppliers of domestic utility vehicles in both the UK and across the globe. However, though Leyland's van arm was able to find a niche for itself beyond the eventual breakup of British Leyland in the 1980s, the LDV firm that succeeded it would not hold longevity, coming to an end during 2009 despite several promising tie-ups with other car builders. Upon the formation of the British Motor Company, or BMC, in 1952, this widespread car-building monolith not only integrated a vast array of motoring brands for regular customers, but also a complicated web of van models under both the Austin and Morris marks. With Austin being promoted as the premier brand, under the severely one-sided leadership of BMC chairman and former Austin leader Sir Leonard Lord, the Morris mark was forced onto lower-end and more humdrum machines that were robbed of any distinct mechanical differences from their Austin equivalents. This was the case for van production, with the Morris name being used as the primary van mark for the BMC firm, although in order to keep the unreasonably influential dealer network satisfied through the sale of both Austin and Morris products in their showrooms, a badge engineering regimen was adopted, with Austin and Morris vans being essentially identical, minus their names and some stylistic changes. In August 1968, 3 months after the completion of the merger between BMC and the Leyland Group to form British Leyland, the Morris and Austin van and light truck division was rebranded merely to BMC, a policy that would last until 1970, when the former Morris J-Series vans became Austin Morris products. Meanwhile, light trucks that had formerly been sold under the Morris Commercials brand prior to 1952 were consolidated in 1970 at the Bathgate plant in Scotland, and were subsequently rebadged under the Leyland Trucks moniker so as to be placed in line with the HGV production division. The fundamental problem with the Austin Morris van sector of British Leyland was the age of its machines, with the Morris J-Series, including the J4 and JU, having underpinnings that dated back to 1956, while the company's LCV panel van market share was dropping off rapidly due to the influx of more modern equivalents in the form of the Ford Transit and Bedford CF. Thus, amid British Leyland's falling place in the wider van market, Stan Dews, an ex-Ford designer and key figure behind the Transit program, was brought back to his previous employ at Longbridge to help develop a new panel van for the company, his first concept, the Leyland CV300, using the engine from the Austin 1800 range to power a front-wheel drive transmission that led to a superb low-loading floor, akin to the famous Citroën HZ. While the CV300 concept had promise, the management axed the scheme due to trade resistance, forcing Dews to develop what was essentially a Transit clone dubbed the CV154, sharing the same practical body shell but with improved styling for the 1970s, though due to the proposed £8 million development cost, the British Leyland bosses scrapped the project. Dews was thus under a huge amount of pressure to deliver a new panel van model as soon as possible, primarily due to the constant demands of the British Leyland management as they watched the company's market share of the panel van sector collapse to only 7%, Dews being forced to raid the parts bin of the existing J4 and JU vans, as well as the regular family car ranges, in order to see which pressings and running gear could be adapted for the new model. The resultant van was thus a motley combination of various pre-existing British Leyland products, incorporating the underframe of the JU, J4 side panels and roof, a Morris Marina 1.8-litre B-Series petrol engine, the C-Series gearbox from the Austin 3-litre, a Marina heater unit, mini exterior door handles, and Austin 2200 steering wheel, while the instrument nacelle came from the Morris Marina van, thus creating the CV306. With the development costs now slashed to only £1 million, the British Leyland management approved the scheme, and Dews began work on a prototype while secretly adding further facets to the van in order to give it more of a competitive edge, much to the chagrin of the product planning and finance departments. In terms of marketing, it was clear that the Ford Transit was truly the dominant figure of the British panel van scene due to its incredible mixture of practicality and performance, something to which the CV306 would struggle to match on even terms while keeping within its constrained £1 million development budget. Thus, the CV306 would instead be marketed to undercut the Transit by presenting a greater value for money, while at the same time exploiting its narrower profile so as to provide greater accessibility on narrow streets and yards, its perfectly cube-shaped cross-section being much more efficient in terms of usable space when compared to the Transit's styled curves. In terms of engineering, the CV306 was to continue the trend for new car-like panel vans as opposed to the forward control configuration of the previous J4 and JU, as well as the rival Ford Thames 400E, all of these machines becoming unfashionable due to a lack of front impact protection and higher servicing costs. The CV306, now dubbed the Sherpa, would place the engine in front of the driver as per a conventional car design, allowing for an extended wheelbase and the front seats to be pushed forward by a few inches to increase the cargo space, while the spare tyre was relocated and the cabin doors were designed to slide outward, granting the van an additional 30 cubic feet of capacity over the J4 and a total capacity of 190 cubic feet. Due to the van being generally an evolution of the J4, the Sherpa could travel from the drawing board to the production line without any major modifications to the design, while its extensive use of parts from other British Leyland products meant there was no need for refurbished assembly facilities at Longbridge. Ultimately, due's insistence that the Sherpa be fitted with a proper channel frame chassis for heavy lift versions of the van pushed the investment budget to £3 million overall, but this presented British Leyland with an exceptionally versatile platform that far outstripped the Ford Transit, that still relied on chassis cabs being made using top hat pressings onto the regular underframe stiffeners. The gamble made by Jews paid off once the Sherpa entered sales during 1974, with its superb mixture of adaptability, practicality and responsive driving manners, seeing British Leyland claw back 14% of the UK panel van market, though under the demands of Deputy Chairman John Barber, the Sherpa entered sales under the somewhat cumbersome title of the New Leyland Van from Austin Morris. This moniker was thankfully short-lived, as after 6 months of general trade and customer confusion, the Sherpa name was reinstated, the early success for British Leyland's new van being supported by the fact that Ford's Southampton plant could not meet the demand for transits, thus leading to long delivery times for prospective customers, while the Bedford CF experienced problems with its slant-4 engine. Very quickly, the Sherpa had earned itself a reputation for robustness, with the British Leyland management often boasting of its incredible practicality, while its body shell design was stated by the marketing team to have a drag coefficient that outshone some of the company's mass-production family cars. In 1978, the range was revised to see the O-Series petrol engine replace the rapidly aging B-Series, though the latter power unit would soldier on in diesel form, while under the corporate reorganization of new chairman Sir Michael Edwards, the Leyland Sherpa fell under the auspices of the Austin Morris division, where it would see the application of a Morris badge, despite it not being marketed as one of their products. By 1980, though, the advantage held by the Sherpa was rapidly superseded by the refreshed Ford Transit of 1977, which robbed 28% of the market and plunged the Leyland panel van down to only 8% of the total share, placing it behind rivals Bedford and Dodge. Under the normal convention of British Leyland during this time of austerity, in preparation for privatisation, such a collapse in commercial performance would be the death knell to the Sherpa, but instead, based on its potential to maintain its position in the marketplace, the management opted to keep the van alive amid yet another corporate reshuffle. In 1981, British Leyland's light commercial operations were reorganised, and the Sherpa van was placed into the Freight Rover division as part of the Land Rover Group, followed in 1982 by the application of the K2 facelift, which gave the van a smart new nose with a Range Rover-style grille and mildly revised panel work, while more significantly, the facelift brought with it some structural alterations to the still J4-derived rear bodywork. These changes included a now vertical trailing edge to the cabin doors, resulting in a tidier appearance, while also allowing for the option of a sliding load bay door capable of taking a standard width pallet, this new feature being promoted heavily by the marketing team, with the advertising agency, Dorland, demonstrating its accessibility through the use of an African elephant. This proved to be the turning point for the Freight Rover, and amid its superb marketing campaign, sales began to pick up again for the van, and with its profitability now showing promise, another facelift was applied, which featured square headlamps, new bumpers, and repositioned indicators, while the range was now divided into the 200 series, which retained the original J4-derived rear bodywork, and a wide-bodied 300 series. The launch of Freight Rover, therefore, had been a sales coup for the wider British Leyland in a manner that was almost completely divorced from the wider performance of the car-building arm, this fact not being lost on the management, but more specifically the government, who were now on the lookout for potential buyers for the individual elements of the conglomerate during the turbulent privatisation of the firm. Thus, in 1986, a tentative deal with General Motors was made by the Thatcher government to sell Land Rover alongside Leyland Trucks and the Freight Rover divisions, though in the wake of the shambolic attempt to sell Westland Helicopters to Sikorsky of America earlier in the year, leading to huge public backlash, the deal was called off on the day it was meant to be signed. Instead, the government offered General Motors only the Leyland Trucks and Freight Rover brands, but with the American car builder only interested in Land Rover, the sale was subsequently called off completely. In 1987, Freight Rover, as part of Leyland Trucks, was sold as a combined joint venture with the Dutch DAF Trucks company to create DAF NV, which was formed to a complex ownership profile of 60% DAF Beheer BV and 40% Rover Group, while products were to be sold under the name Leyland-DAF, with production for the former Freight Rover being maintained at Washwood Heath. The sale of Freight Rover to DAF made sense on a business level, as DAF, which specialized in the creation of HGVs, had no product under 16 tons in the UK, nor did it have any light commercial vehicle in the range on the European market, the subsequent merger creating the largest range of commercial vehicles that stretched from 1.5 to 38 tons. Immediately, Leyland-DAF poured significant investment into the model lineup so as to remain competitive, with the Sherpa 350 being re-engineered to feature two new diesel power plant options from Peugeot, the use of these French engines over the dubious reliability of the former Land Rover units, seeing sales spike considerably, with Leyland-DAF products seeing huge success both domestically and in Europe, where they were badged merely as DAFs. Furthermore, Leyland-DAF opened up new markets in Australia and New Zealand, while the high-roof versions of the 400 series, dubbed the High Loader, was the largest van on sale in the UK, with an internal capacity of 3,500 kilograms, the High Loader finding a dedicated customer in Royal Mail, who often had these vans working 22 hours per day from certain depots, a testament to the reliability of the Peugeot engines. At the same time, DAF NV placed a huge amount of capital into the refurbishment of the former Freight Rover factory in Washwood Heath near Birmingham, as well as opening a new bespoke chassis department dubbed SVO or Specialist Vehicle Options, which provided on-demand coachwork for users, including transport for the disabled, ice cream sellers, tow truck operators, food refrigeration, and fire brigades. Leyland-DAF products, thanks to their size and huge versatility, wormed their way into the fleets of many distinct customers across Britain and Europe, with the police, the army, the navy, ambulance crews, schools, and even breakdown companies such as the AA being regular customers of Leyland-DAF special products. It was at this point also that the Washwood Heath design office, enthused by the new investment from DAF NV, turned its attention to the possible replacement of the original Sherpa-based model from 1974, developing two prospective models in the form of projects FR201 and FR202, with body shell designs being provided by Bertoni of Italy. While the management were not impressed by the external styling, the project was pushed forward regardless in January 1988 with a tight turnaround schedule in mind, expecting the van should be available for market entry within 3 years, with styling for the model being commissioned from MGA. Progress moved rapidly, and within weeks a pair of clay models have been developed, dubbed LDV 201 and LDV 202, the streamlined but simple design of these vans generally mimicking the latest version of the Ford Transit, and production for the vehicles was signed off under the guidance of DAF design manager John de Vries and the Washwood Heath engineering team. However, due to financial constraints within the Leyland-DAF company, the enthusiasm to deliver for a 1991 launch date ebbed gradually away, and French car builder Renault was drafted in as a partner to ease the budgetary pressures of the LDV 201 and 202 program, Renault's analysts quickly concluding that the only financially viable way to release the vans would be as a single model that combined elements of the two proposals. Sadly, the prosperity of Leyland-DAF took a rumble during 1993, where due to the downturn in demand for light and heavy commercial vehicles caused by the 1992 global economic recession, together with a vicious battle for supremacy in Europe Between the truck-building giants of DAF, Volvo and Scania, a price war between the three firms saw DAF emerge as the loser when its market was undercut by its Scandinavian rivals. Thus, with its income having collapsed, DAF NV was ordered into bankruptcy by the Dutch courts, though thankfully a clause in the merger contract, when drafted during 1989, meant that the Leyland side of the DAF business was not included in the administrative process being undertaken for the Dutch lorry builder. Therefore, as DAF NV was broken up at bankruptcy auction, Leyland trucks and Leyland-DAF vans were weathering the storm of the recession with comparative ease, and were initially still selling well on the domestic market despite the fall in demand for vehicles of this particular sector. Sadly, the high-profile collapse of DAF NV sent ripples throughout the truck-building industry, and confidence in the abilities of Leyland to maintain its operations was shattered, as demonstrated when AP Products, a major component supplier, stopped their flow of parts based on the uncertainty of Leyland's future. This news seeing other component firms abandon the builder and productivity slowed to a crawl as parts began to run out. Thus, amid frantic discussions between the senior management and the banks, the executive figures in the Leyland-DAF firm successfully forged a takeover of the van business, which was subsequently renamed to LDV Limited, while the HGV and truck building arm of the company in Leyland itself was broken off as a separate entity dubbed Leyland Trucks, which still survives today as a subsidiary of the American PACCAR Group and is marketed under the DAF brand. However, while LDV had survived the onslaught of DAF NV's collapse, its position in the marketplace was all but destroyed, and the firm would essentially have to start from scratch when it came to re-establishing itself, the range of products receiving light improvements to the mechanics in order to remain competitive, but were generally unchanged from their Leyland-DAF predecessors. At the same time, the 1992 recession and subsequent bankruptcy of DAF NV meant the LDV 201 and 202 scheme was axed completely by Leyland-DAF, though Renault, seeing the merits of the project, continued to develop these machines so as to replace its aging Master van of 1980, leading to the release of the second-generation Master in 1997. Furthermore, International Automotive Design, or IAD, who had been developing the engineering for the LDV 201 and 202, offered the body engineering to Russian firm GAZ so as to create their own panel van model, leading to the release of the Gazelle in 1994, which maintained the LDV bodyshell styling, though the mechanics are largely carried over from the GAZ 31029 Volga family saloon. LDV was soon able to regain much of the lost ground, but while old rivals such as Bedford fell victim to the recession, new ones appeared to steal large portions of the market, including the likes of the Mercedes-Benz Sprinter and the Volkswagen LT, compounded further by the ever-present Ford Transit and its superb second-generation model that had just received a facelift in 1994. At the same time, the box-on-wheels mentality of the 1980s had now given way to a new minimum demand for vans and trucks when it came to comfort, styling and equipment, the products of LDV being comparatively bare bones, while Mercedes, Volkswagen and Ford expended huge investment on internal refinement options to improve the livability of their product ranges. Furthermore, while LDV continued to retain long-term sales contracts with public service and municipal sectors, these markets generated little or in some cases no profit, and in light of stiff competition from most of the rival vehicles, retail and small business sales collapsed completely. In response, LDV undertook a major refresh of the product range in 1997, with the LDV 200 being replaced by the Pilot and the 400 being replaced by the Convoy, though fundamentally, these vehicles retained the same underpinnings as the original Sherpa of the late 1970s, even down to retaining the general rear body shell profile of the Morris J4. While LDV's products, even going back to the Freight Rover days, were not considered high-quality items, by the time of the Convoy and Pilot's launch in 1997, the excuse that these machines were simply basic transportation could no longer hold water in a market demanding far more when it came to utility vehicles, reviewers noting the atrocious ride quality, pronounced understeer, poor brakes, and slab-sided shape that was prone to crosswinds. Furthermore, the Pilot and Convoy kept alive parts for British Leyland products that had been off the market for nearly 20 years, being made up of components that included indicator stalks from the Rover 800 and interior door handles from the Morris Marina, which had left sales in 1980, while other parts were sourced from the likes of the Metro, the Maestro, the Montego, the Austin Maxi, and even the Austin FX4 London Black Cab. The only real saving grace for LDV's products was their simplicity, being easy to operate and maintain, while heavy overhauls that would normally take days or weeks to complete in other van models could be done in a few hours thanks to the uncomplicated design, with most models illustrating a 15,000-mile service interval. Because of this, the LDV Convoy and Pilot would retain 10.5% of the British van market share in 1998. One of the more popular users for these machines, aside from service operators like Royal Mail, the police or ambulance crews, being schools, thanks largely to LDV providing in-house minibus conversions that didn't require the employment of bespoke coach builders, a pioneering business model in the UK. For schools, a standard configuration type included a full reflective school livery, anti-lock brakes, orange external flashing lights, overhead storage racks, heavy-duty ventilation, a reverse warning siren, child-sized 3-point seat belts, and fire suppression systems. This exceptional mixture of features meaning LDV could obtain 60% of the entire UK market for 17-seater minibuses. Furthermore, the design had been tailored for this market through a customer survey carried out among 31,000 schools across Great Britain, while LDV also provided free professional driver training for up to 3 drivers upon purchase of the vehicle, a public relations coup that soon cemented LDV as the king of the primary schools. During June 1998, LDV also began selling under license a rebadged version of the Nissan Vanette, which came in 2 variants, the Vanette E, which shared the basic body shell with the Nissan Serena people carrier, and the Vanette Cargo, which was longer and had a higher roofline for behind the front seats. LDV procured a license to build the Vanette under their own brand dubbed the LDV Cub, the intention being to appeal to small business owners who needed 1-ton payload vans for simple utility work and deliveries, the vehicle being put on sale from July 1998 with a 3-year 60,000-mile warranty, in similar fashion to the 2-year 100,000-mile package made available for the Convoy and Pilot. However, the LDV Cub was essentially an exercise in needless duplication, as the £12,000 van was only £776 cheaper than the Nissan, which was still on sale in the UK and being produced in far greater quantities from a dedicated factory in Spain, while the Cub also shared with the Vanette its endemic flaws of an extremely slow 0-60 time of 28 seconds and build quality that was dubious at best. The Cub would therefore remain in production until 2001, after which Nissan would replace the Vanette with a rebadged version of the Renault Trafic called the Nissan Primastar, which was produced in Luton and Barcelona, LDV, having struggled to sell Cubs in any significant numbers, opting not to continue the license build deal with the new model. Sadly, the Cub's failure was endemic of the general downward trend for LDV towards the middle of the 2000s, as despite the LDV Convoy and Pilot being still much loved by schools and the service sector, it was becoming almost painfully apparent that the 30-year-old design had very few opportunities for improvement left, and would reach a point where nothing further could be done without discontinuing the models. The sheer outdatedness of the LDV product range was demonstrated in that, since its 1974 launch, the Sherpa, Freight Rover, Pilot and Convoy series had not undergone any significant redesign to either its mechanics or body shell, with the exception of an engine change in the late 1980s, while the rival Ford Transit had been subject to 2 full refurbishments in 1986 and 2000. LDV, still conscious that the Convoy and Pilot needed replacement, continued to develop potential successor models, their most prominent being a joint venture with South Korean car maker Daewoo Motor to create what was dubbed the LD100, a machine that was essentially an evolution of the LDV 201 and 202 project of the early 1990s, and would succeed not only the Pilot and Convoy, but also Daewoo's own Lublin van of 1993. However, shortly after the 5-year, £500 million development program had been signed, the wider Daewoo Group collapsed in a whirlwind of controversy during November 1999, the primary cause being the downturn of the Asian markets during the 1997 economic recession, combined with the revelation of widespread bribery within the executive ranks of the firm that amounted to over $400 million. As such, Daewoo Motor was acquired by General Motors in November 2000, though LDV was able to secure the exclusive rights to the vehicle, buying up the tooling and body presses before shipping all materials from Daewoo's plant in Lublin, Poland, to the Washwood Heath factory. After a further 4 years of gradual development, what was dubbed the LDV Maxus entered sales in 2004 and was immediately praised for its stylish exterior and modern driving characteristics when compared to the archaic Convoy and Pilot, being awarded as the Professional Van and Light Truck Magazine Van of the Year 2005. Thus, the LDV Pilot ended production after 31 years in 2005, though the arrival of the Maxus came far too late to reverse the firm's ever-dwindling fortunes, and in December of the same year, LDV was placed into administration, being bought by Group Sung Capital Partners, a Florida-based private equity firm, who subjected the van builder to a financial restructuring. With Sung Capital's analysts stating that the LDV Group would need to produce at least 1,000 vans per month to break even, the firm was sold on July 31, 2006, to the Gaz Company of Russia, with former Ford of Europe executive Martin Leach and former A.T. Kearney executive Steve Young being appointed to run the business and expand production at the Washwood Heath factory. At the time of its relaunch, the only vehicle on sale by LDV was the Maxus, with the Convoy having not restarted production upon the Gaz purchase, the forward planning for the firm being to create a new range of vans and to expand the reach of the company into new markets across Europe and the Middle East. Gaz, meanwhile, opted to support both its own and LDV's interests by exporting the design of the Maxus for production at their plant in Russia, with an initial assembly volume of 50,000 units being outlined for what was dubbed the Gaz Maxus, one of the new markets for the firm being Australia, which had been a traditional selling ground for the Freight Rover and Leyland-DAF models during the 1980s and early 1990s. Sadly, before the Gaz forward plan could be truly implemented, the financial crisis of 2008 saw long-term investment dry up and a catastrophic collapse in van and car sales, with production being suspended at the LDV factory in December 2008 as the company once again ran out of money. In the face of Britain's last volume van manufacturer going into bankruptcy, the Labour government of Prime Minister Gordon Brown, rather than injecting money directly into the firm, offered £5 million worth of grants to enable Malaysia's Westar Corporation to purchase LDV, though Westar would ultimately fail to secure financing. Instead, LDV was placed into administration under the auspices of PricewaterhouseCoopers, the same firm that had overseen the breakup of MG Rover during 2005, with the intellectual property rights being sold in October 2009 to Chinese firm Eco Concept, who sold them on to SIAC Motor in August 2010, who also own a majority of the rights to MG Rover. This led to the restart of Maxus production from SAIC's plant in Wuxi, China during March 2011, with the van now being dubbed simply the Maxus V80, and continues to be sold to this day alongside SIAC's MG division, reuniting the two brands for the first time since the sale of Freight Rover to DAF during 1987, and representing two former British vehicle manufacturers now revived in the People's Republic. As for the Washwood Heath plant, this languished until 2012, after which the entire site was cleared in order to make way for the high-speed 2 approach lines to Birmingham's Curzon Street station. In the end, the Sherpa and Freight Rover divisions of British Leyland, much like the trucks and buses sector, illustrated by far the more profitable side of the car builder, in that it was able to tailor its operations to a market through appealing design while combining it with an economic build process so as to keep production costs to their very minimum. However, once privatised and moving into the 1990s, the cost-cutting methods of British Leyland no longer had a place in a market that demanded much more from modern vehicles, even the utilitarian van sector, and with no sustained capital to ensure new models could be developed, it was only a matter of time before the LDV Group would face its final demise.